Welcome back to Hoochos. Today on Hoochos, I'm going to be releasing a 3D printable MaxiSpike hydroponic system. A hydroponic system designed to go under large pots and planters, designed to allow you to grow any size plant in any size container. Previously on Hoochos, we've explored rain gutter grow systems from the original inception of a hydroponic rain gutter grow system through all of the iterations leading to the AutoSpike and the ability for us to run a rain gutter grow system underneath potted plants as well as bagged plants. The AutoSpike has kind of given us some flexibility with the containers that we use over the top of rain gutter grow system, allowing us to remove those containers and place them aside and replace them easily. This idea eventually evolved into the AutoSpike hydroponic system, and I love this design. I love the fact that you can have a pot fed from a single float valve that you can tailor your hydroponic nutrient to individually if you like, and the ability to both feed with nutrient and water individual plants so that there's literally no upkeep, liberates gardening to all of those time poor or absent-minded people like myself. So the next step from the AutoSpike hydroponic system was to make this form factor work with any size pot or planter. Literally as large as you can think, any shape and any form. We needed to raise this spike slightly so that the float valve could fit underneath the planter. So I played with the idea in my head and came up with this. This is the MaxiSpike hydroponic system. It is an auto-refilling wicking hydroponic system that uses a float valve and a grow spike to feed water and nutrients into any planter. Using plant stands or planter feet, which I've designed to lift any sized pot or planter above our float valve. This is going to allow us to have literally any sized pot automatically refilled, fed and watered from a reservoir which gravity feeds down to our MaxiSpike. Let me show you what I mean. Here I have two containers which would generally be way too large to fit over a standard AutoSpike hydroponic system. And generally planters like these aren't available in a self-watering or wicking form. So we want to retrofit them to make them able to be self-watering and wicking. So this is where our grow spikes come in. Now I am very aware that a lot of large containers come with quite small holes, which a traditional grow spike will have trouble fitting through, so it doesn't get all the way through, which is why I've redesigned some of the grow spikes so that we have a narrower spike, and I've also made some of them twice as long. So I've given you a range of grow spikes that will fit various planters that you want them to fit through, like so. These are all retrofittable to all previous grow spike contraptions. They will all fit within the existing holes. There was no need to change the base of the grow spike. To make these work within our planters, we need to wick them up. I've made major changes to the grow spike so that it is able to be wicked up with a single piece of our wick, and we just thread it through our grow spike. So this is Orimerk wicking cord. It's available on the Hydrolane website. You can use cotton sash if you like. I've just found that this wicks a lot better. Thread that all the way around our grow spike and tie it off like so. And that is going to pierce up into our pot or planter. That will just slide into our MaxiSpike. And this I've already prepared, as you can see, with the sheen on the outside of the 3D print. by spray painting a coat of clear gloss spray paint. Generally, these prints are going to be watertight if you're using the Bamboo Lab printers. No change to the print settings, just use the generic PETG print settings. However, with the feet, I would recommend PETG again. Obviously, a filament that matches your pots. The print settings are going to depend on the weight of your pot. Now, I've just printed these at 10% infill. They're actually quite sturdy. If they fail because you've got a really heavy pot, you just increase the infill density. And that means you can pretty much print these feet to the specifications that you require. If you want to use these feet for other purposes, you can scale them. So just use your slicer to scale the print. I'm also going to include different lengths of this AutoSpike because I'm aware that there are different lengths of float valve. This float valve is the Hydroland version, and this is the shortest float valve that is available when it comes to an elbow float anyway. The shortest iteration of this MaxiSpike is for the Hydroland float valves. However, if you've got a different style of float valve, you'll see that they're like circular and stuff. You physically measure the float valve and then go into your slicer, and there is a measure tool, and you can measure from the point where the float valve would hit to the base of the float valve, and that will give you the appropriate file that you need to print for the float valve that you have. And because I wanted to give you as many options as possible, I've included another offset version, as well as this double grow spike version, which allows you to double the penetration into your pot. To this assembly, we add a quick connect hose fitting. You then place the pot over the top of the system. You want to obviously have your float valve set up and connected at this point, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. We'll just slide over the top and it almost completely hides the fact that it's a self-watering planter now. How cool is that? So you can see it's underneath there, and it's not really even touching the base of our pot because our feet are sort of lifting it above, and most pots will have like a feet built into the pot. And there is our wick there. So this wick is actually going to be absolutely fine because our grow media that we're going to have in the pot is going to wick the rest of the way up. You can use as long of a grow spike as you like here. I've made them up to about here. That wick will water that whole planter. Okay, so it's at this point that you should probably run into the other room and get your partner, who has always been skeptical of hydroponics because it looks unnatural. Well, look at this. This is a form factor that will pass even the most skeptical eye. And I think that this is going to allow a lot more people to convince their partners to take up hydroponics. And the same that I've done for this pot, we can do for large round pots. This is a plastic pot, fortunately, so I can make this hole a bit larger just by drilling out a hole in our pot. And remember, you don't have to have these holes centered. Now this pot is large, but it's not the same form factor as our cement pot. So it won't hide the length of our MaxiSpike if we were to have it directly in the middle. See, it's sort of hanging out the side, and we don't particularly want that. I mean, if you don't care, you don't care. But if you're trying to hide this, we can offset the hole so that the majority of our MaxiSpike is hidden. And to do that, we're just going to whack a hole offset from the center of our pot. This is a Christmas tree bit, and obviously this is a plastic planter. You would need a diamond bit for a cement pot. So we're just gonna, and these are actually available on the Hydroland website as well, because we make a lot of holes in plastic on this channel. And that's gonna allow us just to drop into our pot, and it's going to hide it underneath our pot like so. And as you can see, our wick is just offset to the side here. And This is going to allow the whole pot to wick up from that point. Now, I really want you to expand your mind right now to the possibilities of this system, because these are just two form factors of pots and planters, but you could literally have this underneath any form factor. Large bowls, long planters, anything. In fact, I've been playing with these float valve tray systems in a variety of forms since I released that video a month or so ago. And I've used store-bought trays and online trays, as well as right here, I'm actually in development of a fold-out tray so that we can cheaply manufacture and cheaply ship out to you guys a fold up float valve system. Now this is just a prototype and I'm working on getting the float valve in an orientation that works a little bit better than this. But all of these trays just refill from our cheap Hydroland reservoirs, the fold out reservoirs that are really good for renters. And I think that this is where this style of tray is gonna really shine. It's for people that aren't permanently set up. Now, even though my house isn't much to look at just in general, I love it and I like to make it look as neat as possible. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to set them up at the front of my house. So to start with, we're going to need some grow media to fill them with. Okay, so for the grow media, we're gonna be using a hydroponic grade of cocoa. This is the Hydroland 5 kilogram cocoa that expands into 60 to 70 liters, and it is a washed and unbuffered cocoa. What that means is we're going to rehydrate it with hydroponic nutrient. It's washed of all salts, so the hydroponic salts that we're going to be introducing into the cocoa are going to charge the cation exchange sites on the cocoa with the ions in the hydroponic nutrient. They're going to bind to those sites so that the nutrient is available for the plants. And if there's rain or if you're watering just straight water on top of these plants, the nutrient will stay in the cocoa rather than running through. That means we can have these plants outdoors. So cocoa's unwrapped, and you can split it if you like to make it absorb quicker, break it up a little bit, and we can just add in our hydroponic nutrient, which we have made according to the plants that we're going to have in the system. So this is 2.4 EC between 5.5 and 6.5 pH hydroponic nutrient. This is a diamond white, so it's an all-rounder. This will probably take about 4 watering cans worth of nutrient, which is roughly equivalent to 40 liters. And the way that I like to premix my nutrient is in batches of about 1,000 liters. So this is an IBC. I just fill my watering cans up with my full strength nutrient so that I don't have to mix it every time I want to go and water a plant. And this can also be used as like a single reservoir that you can feed, gravity feed, all of the MaxiSpikes from. So all of your gravity feed systems that include a float valve and your powered systems as well, because this can be added in to a float valve that is on an actively recirculating system so that it tops up those systems as the nutrients are used by the plants. And we'll just add those in as well. So now I'm just going to put the floats in place where I want them and run all of the plumbing. This is just the 11 millimeter internal diameter ever barrier, and it just fits onto all of the stainless steel and brass fittings, and that will just clip into that once I have a pot on top of it. Beautiful. And I'll just clip this hose like so. And I'm going to do the same for the rest of our pots and planters. So if you're like me and absolutely hate the barbed fittings, they're actually a real pain. Even the plastic ones are a real pain in the ass to put together and disconnect. For those with like weaker hands, these are actually a fantastic option. They're kind of like a pneumatic fitting. They spring, and all that you do is you just push them over the top of the hose and they clip in place like that, like so easily. And when you want to unclip them, you just push that back in and they pop off like so. They're not like the most attractive option, but they're very user-friendly. They're really bloody cheap and they come in like a variety of different parts. So you've got a lot of BSP fittings, both female and male, and joiners, as well as these stainless steel internal ball valves, which are super useful for adjusting the flow rate on certain system designs. There's like a bunch of these different parts, and as you can see, they're really easy to sort of push together and take apart once you're done with the system as well. I'm a big fan. I'm going to try and get them in black because it looks a bit weird white on the system, but that's all right. For the two large pots, I'm actually going to be potting up this dwarf peach and this dwarf nectarine. So for these two plants, I'm actually going to combine our charged cocoa with clay balls. This is going to give the plants a little bit of extra structure. They're already in a hydroponic mix. I had them in other systems, and we're just going to fill around with a cocoa clay ball. This is to give them structure as they get larger and start to bear fruit, because as the fruit trees grow and start to bear fruit, the cocoa becomes too soft, and I'm really showing off my failures here, that the trees will fall over. Now you can use anything for structure, scoria, clay balls, as long as it adds permanent structure for your fruit trees. And it also has to be hydroponically inert, so it doesn't cause pH swings in your system. And I'm just going to shovel that into our pots, lining the bottom and covering the grow spike. And I can transfer in my plant. So it's going into winter, which is why it looks this way, but this is going to look really good once it comes into spring next year. And fill around it. And once you're happy with how much grow media is in the pot, I'm just going to top that off with some clay balls to stop any evaporation. It also gives it a nice look. And to these, I'm adding in some plants I've been propagating for a while. This is a Monstera Thai constellation, which has been raised in a hooch multi-bucket with the self-watering planter base on the bottom. And you can see here, it is absolutely loving the self-watering pot. But it's time to move into a slightly bigger pot in a slightly better position, so that I can enjoy it rather than it being hidden away in the studio. So I'm just going to remove it. And you can see there, have a look at that. So many roots. And we'll just pop that one in pride of place in the corner here. And at the front, a Zanzibar gem. And we're just gonna fill around. And here I've got a Monstera albo, which we're going to plant over in this pot. There we go. You can see all the roots there, like so. And this is a black Zanzibar gem. And just for some support, I'm going to throw in one of my 3D printable moss poles filled with sphagnum moss, so we can tie up our Monstera albo and give it some support, like so. And there it is. That is the MaxiSpike hydroponic system. All of these files are available on my Patreon. I hope you enjoyed them, and I wish you a happy hydroponicking. I'll see you next time on Hoochos. All right, so I made this. This is like an auto waterer, and then these are grow spikes. And then I couldn't help myself. I just had to make one with a dual spike function. This is gonna be
As if it wasn't phallic enough. There you go.